maybe you're not sure you can commit to the tech exit lifestyle for the long term, but don't you want to know if your child like could be a better version of themselves if they just got rid of the screens? And so many families actually started down this tech exit lifestyle by just testing out a digital detox because they felt like they had really reached rock bottom with their kids and with their kids' behavior.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Narrative Podcast. Mike Andrews, David Mahan, and Chris Lightfoot is joining us today for the news segment. Chris, you look intimidated.
Better than Aaron Bear. Sitting in his seat and everything.
Do that. Now he's going to have words for me when he comes back.
He's going to have words for all of us.
You said you were better.
It's true.
Nice.
Let me on the podcast. I'm better than Aaron. I just need the opportunity to prove it. It's a direct quote, Aaron. We want you to know that came from Chris's mouth. We are not making it up. Well, it is good to have you here, Chris. We're grateful for you. We'll actually air the interview that you just helped us record next week, and we'll talk more about that.
Then Justin's great.
Yeah, Justin Whitmore early will be our guest next week to talk about some stuff he's doing around fatherhood. This week, we're actually going to have an interview with Clare Morell from the Ethics and Public Policy Commission about her work in the book, The Tech Exit, about smart use around smart screens and tech devices and all that stuff. Great conversation. She's really smart. Yeah, some really great ideas. I know you're going to be blessed by that. It'll be coming up here in a little bit, but we wanted to cover some news topics here at the start of the program because things are moving again back at the Statehouse, David. I know it's been a busy couple of weeks for you and Ryan and the policy team, and just wanted to get a catch up of what you've been seeing over at the Statehouse and some good news that we have to share, especially around the success sequence bill.
Yeah, a lot of good things moving. We've got the App Store age verification bills that are going. And everybody's got their own version. Apple's got theirs, Meta's got theirs, Google's got theirs.
This has one going, I think.
Right.
Get in the mix. It's just,
but we're seeing some good movement there, and we've got a couple coming up next week that some of our listeners may remember: the Indecent Exposure Organization Act, which deals with two areas. One, adult cabaret performances being done in public where kids could see. That would fix all of that kind of thing. It would also fix the situation that you heard us talk about in Greene County, where there was an individual, walking around a locker room without clothes on, and he actually beat his case because, he was so heavy, that his genitalia was covered by his stomach, and so he could sit and look at kids all day, but because they couldn't see him, then he beat his case. So we just need to fix what indecent exposure means, and it's really just changing private parts to private area, which is already clearly defined in code. It was something that could have easily been done by the judge, but chose not to do that. And so we're going to make sure that the judges will do it in the future.
No gray area on that.
That's right. Right. I applaud you for not being 12 there.
It was in my head. I still went ahead. I'm going to say it. I'm going to leave it alone after that, but I really want to. Eighth grade, Mike.
Shut up. All right. So Baby Olivia, Representative Miller's got the Baby Olivia Act, and that will also be next week. And that would mandate fetal development instruction across the state for children. And that's just amazing. I mean, if we're in schools talking about human development, then let's talk about human development.
Yeah.
Right? Why would we omit such an amazing, interesting part of human development, probably the most interesting for kids around human development. And so that's another big one. But there's a couple big wins that we had here recently. One was on the marijuana front, SB 56 dealing with intoxicating hemp. That passed the Senate. It just recently passed the House. Couple changes there, but then it goes back for concurrence and then be signed by the governor for sure, because he's the one that initiated the fact that we need to stop these high THC products from being sold without any regulation. Kids can literally go to the gas station and purchase these products, and that would put a stop to that.
Yeah, and sometimes there are those who are actively seeking those products out. And as we've seen with even Governor DeWine in his press conference, when he showed how close the packaging is, and we talked about this last week, there have been kids who just walked in and or parents who thought they were buying something for their kids and ended up buying the wrong thing that was laced with THC.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right. I mean, if an adult wants to, indulge in that kind of thing, they can go to Chris over here and they, buy whatever they
We
want.
were raised in Colorado. You've had it for a long time. This is old news.
The big news yesterday in the Senate, Senator Catrona's bill that would mandate the instruction of the success sequence, which basically says, real simple message. Hey, if we can graduate high school, work a full-time job in your 20s and get married before have kids, 97% of young people will avoid poverty. Right? There's nothing else we can do at the State House that would give us that kind of results.
And a very non-controversial message, right? Like no feedback whatsoever, no opposition at all to that message.
Yeah, well, one side of the floor, 100% of them voted against the success sequence, believe it or not. When it came to graduating high school, check, I'm with you. Work a full-time job, most of them check, I'm with you. But the whole marriage piece, I keep telling you guys that we would assume that when you mention fatherhood, that you automatically are talking about husbands in the context of marriage, but it's not. Most of the time when you hear fatherhood outside, in culture, they are not talking about marriage. They are the furthest thing from wanting to talk about marriage. And over here they say, well, okay, if you bring up marriage in schools, it's toxic. It can even be harmful to kids to encourage marriage in the classroom.
David, can you just reiterate that and maybe even unpack it a little bit? Because I think that is so outside the norm for our typical listener that it takes a little bit to sink in. So what do you mean by that? Why is that outside? Why would this be controversial at all? And why is fatherhood not synonymous with marriage and husband?
Well, again, in my world at the State House, it's a little different than, in just out on the street, right? The guy on the street, we would all, for the most part, we may be able to agree on some things. At the State House, they have constituents that they have to worry about, right? That they have to pander to. And many of their constituents are groups like Planned Parenthood. They're very far left groups, like LGBT groups, right? Who, when you mention marriage, that cuts against their idea of marriage. It is outdated and antiquated. We've got thruples now. I never thought, right, that I would come to a job and two elected officials in probably the span of 1 hour would mention the term thruple to me. Where am I living? Like, this was this morning. And I would be the third mention of thruple. But again,
I thought you meant you were the third one in the thruple.
No. Babe, you already know. These man had 30-something years of marriage. What? The thing is, though, when I go to churches and we just say fathers, right? We about to have an interview, and I asked the guy, when you say fathers, what percentage of those fathers would you say are also husbands? And you just see the look on his face. It was like, it's obviously most of them, all of them, yeah. Whereas out in my world, right, in the context of the State House and public policy, in the context of the Ohio Commission for Fatherhood, that just got $20 million to talk about responsible fatherhood, I do a word search on marriage and husbands, and not one mention of either one of them. This is a reality that the body of Christ needs to understand. Why? Because if they think, when they say fathers, and that we need to talk about fatherhood, if they assume that everybody sees that as husbands or connected some kind of contextual way to marriage, then they won't talk about fathers, right? They won't be intentional about teaching about marriage and family, because they assume that everybody knows this is what you're supposed to do. This is the norm, and it is no longer the norm.
Yeah. You mentioned something there. I want to make sure we go back and highlight on the website for the Fatherhood Commission, no mentions of husband or marriage.
Yes, just on Saturday, I'm going to Northeast Ohio to talk to a group of pastors on the request of a state representative and tell them, you have to get involved in family formation. You have to get involved in fatherhood ministry, because if you allow the world to do it, the world's doing it, right? We just gave them $20 million. The world did that, right? The State House did that, but they sent the money to a bureaucracy that doesn't believe in marriage. As a matter of fact, if they do, they believe that it's toxic. So So who else beside the body of Christ is going to, change this cultural progression that we see or find ourselves in?
Yeah. Amen. And I think it's worth noting too, when you mention the constituents that a lot of these lawmakers have, and when they're dealing with those heavily left-leaning organizations like Planned Parenthood, to promote this stuff also grates against their bottom line. Like, not only the worldview issue, but like to promote healthy families and fathers being responsible for their decisions also eliminates the need for Planned Parenthood. So that's another
It
motivation
doesn't
factor.
just cut against their bottom line. It cuts against their reality, their personal reality, right? Most of their kids benefit from a married mother and father. And to a person they vote against teaching that instruction to others, it is the most hypocritical thing I see.
Yeah,
It's just watching that.
It's a lot like the school choice debate. You see so many people speaking against it who send their kids to private school.
Their kids all go to private school. Yeah. Anyway,
We don't need to go there. But well, before we get to the interview this week, and Chris, since we got you here, I would love just a quick update on some of the stuff going on with Church Ambassador Network, with what you're doing with Communio. I know we've talked about that here on the program, and we've had JP as a guest, and also the Minnery Fellowship is gearing up again. And I don't know if we've covered that a whole lot, but I think it's a great opportunity to just kind of talk about what you're doing there with pastoral training. And
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So Minnery Fellowship, we'll start there, this is the first year. So we launched it in the spring. They're in their second semester now this fall, going through Dr. Carl Trueman's book, Strange New World. And I think that's been really valuable for we've been getting really good feedback on it. So we're excited to continue that. We're expanding. I think we're up to 4 cohorts now, looking at 7 or 8 launching in the spring. So God's doing really good work. And our pastors, they just keep telling us this is an area, a gap for them where they need somebody to help them help their people navigate what's going on in culture and society. So we're just trying to put together tools, resources that we can give them so that they have what they need to equip their saints for the work of the ministry, but in this current cultural context, right? It's just a unique time to be serving the body of Christ as a local shepherd in that local church context. So that's been a lot of fun. We're going to dive into Os Guinness's book, The Magna Carta of Humanity, in the spring. We know our pastors are going to be getting a lot of questions about the 250th anniversary, and it's an election year. And so we said, let's go back to what was the foundation. And Os Guinness does a great job kind of setting up the 1776 revolution founded in Judeo-Christian principles, and kind of juxtaposes that against the 1789 French Revolution that was founded under Enlightenment principles. And he argues that over the last 250 years of the country, we've drifted heavily towards a French Enlightenment culture, and that we need to come back to our first principles, our Judeo-Christian principles. So I think our pastors are really going to enjoy that in the spring. And then, man, Communio, Hope in a Future, that has been picking up a lot of steam. Obviously, our Essential Summit, the whole theme was restoring the root, revitalizing the family, and Communio was a part of that with us. We have a lot of pastors and a lot of churches looking to us and asking the question, what does it look like? What does it mean for us to launch an intentional marriage and family ministry, which is a lot of what we just talked about with Justin that we'll hear more about next week. And we're really excited to lean more into that. We're kicking off our Hope in a Future tour on Friday next week.
coming soon to a city near you.
That's right. And we're doing that kind of in a state church partnership around the state with in-district legislators, and there'll be kind of 90-minute conversations. We're going to provide a meal and bring pastors together and say, how do we address this in your local context, in your community, in your district? How do we bring intentional marriage, parenting, relationship ministry to your community through your local church to reestablish and to address those things that are assumed that we need to be teaching on, and we need to be helping the people in the community understand that through a biblical lens. So we're really excited about those.
Yeah, that's great stuff, exciting times, and grateful for you sharing, and grateful to spend this time with you today, Chris and David. It's been fun, and we're gonna tee up now the interview with Clare Morell and the tech exit. It's great stuff. I promise you, she's not here to make you feel guilty. She's here to empower you as parents to make smart decisions for your kids, especially with how they use and interact with screens. Really enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure you're going to benefit from it too. It's coming up next on The Narrative. Hey, Narrative listeners. You know, Christians in the marketplace today face more unique and challenging threats than ever before. Businesses are following woke capitalism, chambers of commerce are beholden to social justice, and secular activists are chipping away Christians' First Amendment rights. As Ohio's only Christian chamber of commerce, the Christian Business Partnership stands in the gap to advocate for, to educate, and to celebrate Christian business owners. Joining the partnership also allows businesses to provide their employees with healthcare insurance, workers' compensation, and exclusive banking and educational discounts. To find out more and to join, go to cbpohio.org. That's cbpohio.org. And we're back on The Narrative. Mike Andrews and Aaron Baer, joined now by Clare Morell, who's a fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center in the Bioethics, Technology, and Human Flourishing program. She's previously worked in the White House and Department of Justice and is an author and commentator. We're talking to her today about her new book, The Tech Exit, A Practical Guide to Freeing Kids and Teens from Smartphones. Clare, thanks so much for joining us today on The Narrative. It's great to have you.
No, I'm glad to be here.
Well, let's talk about the book. Just as far as an overview goes, I know that this is one of those areas as a parent where I can be really hard on myself and try to figure out what that exact boundary line is, or feel like I'm, maybe not putting my kids in the best position to succeed with how they use technology. And you've written this as not as something to make me feel worse about how I'm doing, but as an encouragement, right? And just a very
That's right.
practical guide to help me figure this out with my kids. So talk about your inspiration for it and how you arrived at some of the conclusions you did.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. And I really wanted to meet parents where they're at. And because I think most parents know in their guts that screens and smartphones aren't ideal for our children, but they've started to feel like an inevitable part of childhood and adolescence. But my research in the public policy space the last nearly 5 years now just revealed to me just how harmful smartphones and other interactive screens are for kids, their brain development, mental health, also the kinds of violent, sexual, dangerous content they can be exposed to, the ease of access that predators have to reach children through not just social media, but the myriad apps available on any tablet or smartphone device, and how kind of woefully insufficient the parental controls were. And so I had become convinced a smartphone free childhood was necessary. But my question was, is this possible? I'd be asked often by parents, for my advice. And I would say, well, I would not give a smartphone or social media to my own children. But they would express all the pressures that they really realistically felt as parents. And so I was looking for a resource, a roadmap to give parents, okay, this is how to do it. This is how to overcome those challenges. And I couldn't find one. And I just really desperately wanted to help the parents on the front lines, as I'm doing my policy work, wanted to help parents. And so that this is the book was the result of that. I kind of set out on this journey to really answer this question, is this possible? How is it possible? How have families done this kind of total opt out, which is what the book holds forward to parents, but really with a message of hope and positivity that, like, yes, this is necessary and kind of here's why. And I make a case for that in the book, but also it's never too late to reverse course. You don't need to give up, kind of throw up your hands. And like, here are the practical steps to take, even just taking baby steps to get started kind of down this path of exiting, particularly these addictive screen technologies from childhood.
Well, I'm the worst parent in the world, I think, according to my 15-year-old who's currently T9 texting all of his friends, like we had to do back in the old days on the flip phone.
With the rotary phone. And look who just rolled out of bed. David Mahan is joining us. It's just 2:00 in the afternoon. Finally.
Look, I'm sorry. We just renovated our building. I don't even know where I'm at half the time. I was on 3 floors looking for this podcast.
Anyway,
I was going to let you go low key and we're just going to re-record the intro. We're going to pretend like you just manifested, but that's not how we do it here. We're going to call you up. And
anyway, so Claire, you just used the phrase total opt out. What does that mean in the tech side? What does it mean with your recommendation in the book for a family to totally opt out of tech?
Okay, let me hold out the ideal. So the tech exit is no smartphones, no social media, no interactive screens like tablets or iPads, and no video games during childhood. Now, I will say the book makes the strongest case against smartphones and social media, but in my research, a lot of the brain research especially had implications for other interactive screens. And, tablet is really just a larger version of a smartphone. And so, especially if you want to be successful in not giving your teen a smartphone, that makes it really difficult then to hand your 4-year-old a tablet because they're very similar. And so that is what the total tech exit is, a total opt out. And so what you didn't hear me say in that is I didn't mention television or computers. Now, while I explain in the book that these tech exit families minimize their use, particularly of screen entertainment like television, some of these families do choose to use a TV as a shared family activity. The same is true for computers. There are ways to teach our kids to use computers as a tool, intentionally and purposefully in a way that's very public and can be easily overseen by the parents. So, what the tech exit in particular is an exit from these most addictive forms of screen technologies to kids, which are namely smartphones, the slew of social media apps, and then just interactive tablets. Basically, anything where the child is interacting with the screen, including video games as well.
Yeah. So, real quick, as you were doing this, what was the most surprising thing you came across in your research? I mean, I think for all of it, like you said, and I was even talking to somebody about this the other day who's got, I've got little ones, but they've got kids that are really in that like 20 to 25 range, which is kind of that generation that we didn't have all the data at the time to show how bad this was, right? They were sort of the experimented on generation. Um, but he made a comment of like, we kind of intuitively knew that this was bad. So I think a lot of us intuitively know just from our experience with cell phones that they're kind of addictive and have all these negative things. What was the thing as you were researching that was most surprising to you in this?
Yeah, a lot of things. I'll try to give a couple quick things that were surprising. I think the mental health kind of harms have been well documented now, but I think the kind of most alarming things to me was more on the brain research side. And I talk about this a lot in the chapter on why screen time limits don't work, because we've kind of had this metaphor as a culture that even these interactive screens can kind of be treated in this category like sugar, can be enjoyed in moderation, but let's not use them too much. Well, the brain research I was seeing was actually showing me like even in small amounts, these screens are highly addictive. And studies are showing that even if a child's only using it for a short amount of time per day, can still have kind of divergent brain development over time. And the most kind of striking anecdote was I came across this research by a doctor named Victoria Dunkley. She was seeing kids in her practice. She's a psychiatrist for just a lot of emotional dysregulation, tantrums, poor focus, kind of hyperactivity, just a difficulty regulating emotions. And so the parents were coming in thinking their kids had ADHD or autism. And she would make all her patients do a total screen detox for 30 days, like no video games, no tablets, no screens. And what she found was that for many of these kids, they actually didn't have an underlying disorder or symptom. It was all induced by the screens. And for children who did have an underlying condition, just eliminating the screens cut their symptoms in half before any other interventions or treatments. And what she found was just the screens were really dysregulating kids' nervous systems. And she said, even in small amounts, even if it was, oh, it's just 20 minutes a day on a screen, or, we just make an exception on the weekends. And on the weekends, they get to do 2 hours of video games, which she would say was kind of like a binging strategy, that even those kind of strategies where they're not on it excessive amounts each day was still extremely dysregulating to kids' nervous systems and was exhibiting itself as these symptoms that looked like something like autism or ADHD in terms of a kid's kind of behavior and emotional dysregulation.
Yeah, I can't imagine, how tough this may be for you because when I was working with kids every day and parents, they just couldn't understand the threat. And this was like 10, 12 years ago. We're hearing kids talk about, chat bots now, right? Like not even just human predators that are targeting children, but chat bot therapists, right? That you have no idea what's going on. Kids falling in love with AI type stuff. Like, you know, what is a chat bot and why do parents need to be concerned about, the applications of chatbots?
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you brought this up because, yeah, like it's crazy how fast technology has accelerated that even at the time of writing my book, chatbots weren't even on the scene yet, and now they're everywhere. And so I tell parents, they're like, well, how does your book speak to AI? And I'm like, oh, it's just that now the tech exit is more urgent than ever, because now these AI chatbots are being integrated into every social media platform and into every kind of app on your phone. And just talking about the smartphone or interactive device, parents don't even realize the hundreds of new AI chatbot apps there are available in the App Store, every day. And it's impossible for a parent to effectively oversee. But to answer your question, the worst kind of manifestation of these AI chatbots are these AI companions, which they have anthropomorphic characters. They're trying to mimic human interaction, human emotions, human even features. The way that the chatbot looks like a human. They talk, act like a human. And so kids are actually developing romantic relationships with these chatbots who are speaking inappropriately, speaking about sexual things with kids, suggesting sexual behaviors and conduct to kids. And for many of the parents I've heard from on these chatbots, they said they just had no idea their child was even talking to an AI chatbot, had no idea they had downloaded this app onto their phone, because it's incredibly difficult for parents to oversee, which again is why I'm arguing for the total opt out. But these new AI technologies on the horizon are taking kind of the harmful things we've seen from smartphones and social media to new levels, just really of danger and deception, where kids who are just innocent and unsuspecting trust and think that this person they're talking and interacting with is actually a human on the other side of the screen, when it's not. It's just a computer code algorithm generated machine that is not a real human and does not have their interests in mind. And so, we're finding AI is really exploiting our children.
And in the realm of there's nothing new under the sun, I'm reminded of when I was in college, just a year or two ago. Wasn't that long. All right. It was like 20 years ago. But as a communications major, I had to do a research project on just kind of the effects of television on kids. And this was, like I said, 20 years ago. It was late 90s, early 2000s. And one of the prevailing pieces of research that nobody was doubting at that point was kids can't distinguish between real and fake violence on movies and television. And then the very kind of strict structure they had around advertising that was targeted toward kids, and how that played into like Saturday morning cartoons and stuff like that, because kids couldn't make the distinction. So, and what I'm hearing you say with AI and chatbots, there's still that element of kids' brains haven't matured to the point where they can make this distinction for themselves. Is that a fair way of summarizing that?
No, absolutely. They don't have and again, this comes up in some of the brain research as well. Like, kids' brains are not fully formed and developed. That prefrontal cortex part of our brain that is responsible for our judgment, decision making, personality development, self control, impulse control, emotional regulation, all our kind of executive functioning skills isn't fully developed until age 25. And so kids have a really hard time discerning between reality and fantasy, and they have a really hard time controlling their impulses. And so unfortunately, these social media platforms, these AI chatbots, they prey on our worst kind of human vices. And it's very difficult when they're feeding these things up to kids, especially of the sexual nature, for a kid to not be naturally curious or just impulsive, and to go down then dangerous rabbit holes. So I just view it as just really perniciously preying on children's natural human vulnerabilities, with their brains not being fully developed the way an adult's is.
I think there's an important part of what you just said there, Claire, of intent on the behalf of the social media companies or smartphone makers or things like that. This is stuff that we're dealing with at the Statehouse in Washington all the time with the big tech companies. And whenever, David just yesterday worked on the App Store accountability bill.
Oh, yeah.
What talk about how the tech companies that this isn't a bug but a feature for them as they're building out these apps and building out these devices.
That is the business model. It is to maximize the extraction of time, attention, and data from their users, because their entire business model is based on this ad revenue. Like, the service looks free to you as a user, but it's because they're selling your time and attention and data to advertisers. And they know too that, adoption of a certain platform or app, the younger you are, the more likely you are to continue then using that particular service or platform over time. So it's a race to the the bottom. They want to hook users young, so that they will be able to continue to profit off that user over the course of their lifetime. And so, unfortunately, the business model is just not aligned with parents' interests. Like I try to explain this all the time. Like parents' interests are directly opposed to those of the big tech companies. They don't want the child to use their product with moderation. And unfortunately, too, in terms of the content features, the algorithms themselves really promote the most kind of sensational, dangerous, inappropriate content because they know that that lures users in and keeps them on longer. And so, in all these elements, the design, the constant pings and notifications, and the metrics of likes and followers, and the infinite, feed that never ends, or the autoplay features, like these are all design features to keep you on longer, including children. And then the algorithms are also promoting sexual and dangerous content as another way, again, to keep users engaged on the platform. And so they don't have your child's interests in mind. They are for-profit companies who are really exploiting our children for their own profits.
Yeah, for anyone that listens to the narrative on, with any regularity, that we've got a lot of policies out there floating around, like Aaron talked about, App Store, age verification. We've got, age verification for, sites that, deal with pornography or obscenity. We got AI restrictions on obscene material being floated. And then, we in the budget, no cell phones in schools whatsoever for kids. I mean, I think that some of these are good moves. What would you say would be, your top 2 or 3 policy prescriptions to deal with this issue?
Policy. You're speaking my love language. That was my way into all this work, was through policy solutions. So, that's so hard because I want all the solutions, but I would say, the most kind of important ones to me are age verification for porn sites. There should absolutely be no reason why kids should have any ability to access these kind of most egregious sites. And that's now passed in 24 states and been upheld by the Supreme Court. So to me, if our federal Congress cannot pass this law, I'm really going to lose a lot of hope in our government, because we've now had almost half the country pass this at the state level, and the Supreme Court say it's constitutional. So I want to see that nationwide, that kids are protected from accessing pornography websites.
Has someone introduced that, Claire? By the way, sorry, has someone introduced that federally yet?
Yes, it's been introduced. It's called the Screen Act federally in the House. It was Rep. Mary Miller in the Senate. It's been Senator Lee. It's just really struggled to gain traction. So please talk to your senators and representatives, because it's something I'm actively working on the Hill here in DC, is trying to get momentum behind this. And I'm encouraged. House Energy and Commerce recently just told me they're really trying to push for the Screen Act to get moved through their committee. And so I hope if they're kind of pushing from the House side, it will put some pressure on the Senate to take it up as well. So yes, to answer your question, it has been introduced federally. It just has not yet moved or been passed through any committee. And then I also think phone bans are just a winning policy, and that even if you can't get parents to all agree to just not give smartphones to their kids, at least protecting the school day and the entire school day, not just class periods, but passing periods, lunch, recess, the entire social environment of the school day, I think can be really powerful, just antidote to countering these effects. And I think it actually can make it easier on parents to choose to opt out. If they can't access their phone the entire school day, then, why do they need to have a smartphone after school? And it lets kids kind of test out a smartphone-free lifestyle for themselves during the school day and kind of see those benefits. So I really like school phone bans, but I would just say the implementation can really vary. And I've even heard this from parents, well, my school has a phone ban, but they don't really enforce it. So you definitely have to have good enforcement top down from the school administration. And again, a bell to bell ban where it's not even part of the school day is the ideal model, versus them having access to it between classes. And then I do like the App Store Accountability Act or parental consent for social media laws, just anything that is backing parents up and giving parents more authority rightfully over their kids online experience, if any. So parental consent for social media laws, and also parental consent for any app download or access to the App Store, like the App Store Accountability Act would do. So I like all of the above. I think that sometimes the app stores and the social media platforms kind of fight against each other. Like social media wants it to all be on the app stores, the app stores want it to all be on the platforms. And the answer is we need both. We need kind of all levels of coverage. So yeah, those are some policy solutions I personally have been working on advocating for.
So I want to look at two different groups here, Claire. One, how should schools be approaching tech right now, beyond just cell phone bans, right? I mean, I think this is something my wife and I, and you did a podcast with my wife on Breakpoint not too long ago. But we're talking to our school about, hey, why are we taking tests on tablets? Right?
Yes.
Get Chromebooks out of classrooms.
Right.
Please.
Yes.
All of that nonsense. How should schools be thinking about tech? And then second, how should pastors be thinking and teaching about how to deal with this technology today? So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, great. And both groups are so important. So for schools, like I write this in the book, like we just need to get all screens out of schools. It's not just the phones. Phones is just a starting point. But unfortunately, again, going back to the tech companies, they have pushed these educational technologies, these Chromebooks and laptops and iPads on the schools, saying that a one-to-one laptop policy is going to improve learning outcomes. But I have found the most compelling cases to just point to the data and say, regardless of what you think of the technology as a moral issue, like they're not improving learning. Kids' learning outcomes nationally, national scores have just been plummeting. And people will point to COVID, but you just point them back further and say, no, the scores have actually been on the decline since 2012, which was shortly after the kind of big push to get all these screens into schools. And other studies show why. They show that kids' brains comprehend text more deeply when they read it on paper versus a screen. The screen actually encourages skimming instead of fully reading and comprehending a text. So in just pretty much every way, the screen is going to be worse than a child learning through books and paper and pencil, which has been the traditional tools of learning for centuries. And so I would also just give a hopeful example that I hope the US would follow, which is the country of Sweden was one of the first adopters of EdTech. In 2009, they replaced all paper textbooks with screens. And just this year, they reversed course. Sweden is not a Christian country. I mean, they're very secular, but they're just looking at the data and they're like, you know what? The screens are not improving learning. And so they have invested about $1.2 million as a country into replacing all the screens with paper textbooks to ensure every Swedish student has a textbook in each subject. And so I think that the US should not be afraid to reverse course. And there's natural opportunities arising as some of these Chromebooks need to be refurbished or replaced over time. Like this is a huge investment on the parts of schools. They're investing a lot of money in the screens. And so I think when those decisions are coming up, like budgetary decisions, parents advocating to the school that, hey, we would really like to see a return to textbooks and to move away from the ed tech learning screens, I think can really actually happen. And I've seen some counties in the United States where that's happening, where the school district is making the decision not to replace or refurbish the Chromebooks, but to return to pencil and paper. So that would be my push, because they're distracting at best because of all the distractions students can pull up, and then they're just honestly harmful and detrimental to learning at their worst. And the last note of that is that there's now a huge push to integrate AI into education. And we've seen that ed tech has not worked, and we cannot repeat our mistakes with allowing every kid to have an AI chatbot tutor on their desk, because even that will be an even worse threat in the sense that the AI will now be doing the learning for the student instead of allowing them to engage in the learning process. So as you can tell, I'm pretty anti-tech in schools.
Yeah. We've done a lot of talking about, how tech is affecting, education, but what about adults, right? Like how's tech, impacting, parenting, right? Now, like I like to go outside, I hunt, I fish, which means I have extended periods of time where I'm not on my phone, which makes that.
To you, David, a tablet's a stone thing that you etch into. I mean, let's be honest, David.
So I like to think that those activities make me more healthy than some of these other guys I'm sitting around the table with. But how does technology impact adults?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you raised this point. And I talk about this in the book because I try to explain, like, parents, like, we are really our children's best teachers and models in terms of how we want them to use technology. And especially, if we're doing the tech exit, we're not giving these things to our kids. Like, we want to live a lifestyle consistent with that. We don't want to say, oh no, you can't have a smartphone, but then I, as the parent, am on my smartphone all the time, because the child will say, well, then why is it so bad for me? Like, it must be bad for you too. And if you're telling me I shouldn't have one, then why do you treat this phone, this device, as so important? And so I try to explain to parents, like, we have to ask ourselves, how do I want my child to use a smartphone as an adult? And am I using it that way? And I think, again, I recommend practices in the book, like just physically distancing ourselves from our phones as much as possible, especially when we're home or we're present with our kids, is really just like the best way to ensure that we're engaging with them, our full attention, and we're not being distracted away by the screen, because it does send this message, every time, a child's talking to you and then you turn to your phone, you're communicating that the phone is more important than this real person, this real conversation in front of you, even if, no parent believes that, but our actions, reflecting that. And so this doesn't mean parents have to completely give up their smartphones, but we should seriously consider ways to distance ourselves physically from our devices and just practice those breaks from the phone so that we're not so addicted and dependent. Like, I love what you mentioned, just going out in the woods or hunting, just being without your phone. And I know some families do like a phone-free Saturday. Parents will just kind of leave their phone in a box in the house, like away for the day, and just try to take like a total break from it. So practices like that, or just making your phone less addicting. I mean, ruthlessly deleting apps. I know a lot of parents who they basically deleted everything they really didn't need to do on their phone that can wait to be done on a computer, so that there was just less drawing them back to the phone. So I think these are important steps parents can take. And I realized I forgot to answer the point about pastors, because
Yes.
I
Yeah.
do think that churches should be leading on this and not just following the way of the culture, but just encouraging parents, like Christians, we are countercultural. Like, our family shouldn't look like the world where every kid is on a device or a phone. And for pastors, I'd really emphasize, not just the physical, emotional, or mental health harms to kids, but the spiritual harms that, especially as Christian parents, we're trying to form and disciple our children. And we're trying to teach them that the most important thing is for them to have a relationship with Jesus and to love God and love others. But the phone, the device, the social media apps, they inherently undermine that. Regardless if you're like, well, I'm going to control all the content they see, the device itself, like the medium of the technology, sends the message that life is all about you and your own entertainment and amusement. And you can just kind of scroll your life away and distract yourselves away from eternal matters. And it's just an inherently self-focused device that is just designed to continually feed you up more and more entertainment and amusement, rather than pointing you outwards, pointing your eyes upwards to God, but then outwards to the community and relationships that God has placed you in, that you're meant to be faithful to. So I really think churches can do a lot to encourage parents in that discipleship, and point out that, the smartphones really undermines what parents are trying to do. And then also, just like practically, youth groups should just be a phone-free environment. Just encouraging kids to leave their phones at home, that we're not going to be on our phones at youth group, and actually trying to provide that real life fellowship, that is such a powerful then antidote to the kind of just shallow connections, of the screen-based online world. So those would just be some practical pieces for pastors, is just, yeah, encourage parents in the right direction in this. And then also for the youth of the church, try to provide these environments, as the church community, free of the digital technologies.
Yeah, I love that emphasis on the church being the relational community, because I imagine this tech exit has to have a very strong relational component to it, like to
Yeah,
fill that gap with actual relationship, with face-to-face
that's
interactions, with, especially for kids, opportunities for play and imagination and bonding through play.
Well, and Claire, just to build on
exactly.
that, one of the things that Maria's been really big on since reading your book has been doing the tech exit in community with our kids' friends. Can you talk
Yes.
about why that practically in implementing this is so important.
Yes, no, so I'm glad you both raised those points because it's a really key theme of the book that I kind of hammer home is that there unfortunately are these collective aspects of the harms of smartphones and social media that, even a kid not on these devices, if all of their friends are on smartphones or social media, they can still feel left out. There can still be that kind of just negative social group dynamics created by these devices. And so and it's also just difficult to resist the pressures on your own. So I really encourage, like, the very first point in the acronym I use in the book, FEAST, to describe how to do the tech exit is find other families. Like, you must find other parents to do this with you, your kids' friends, talking to those parents, getting everyone on board, because it makes it easier on all the parents to be united, to not have the pressure that their peers are all getting these phones. And then it also provides those real life friendships and relationships for the kids, that they can actually experience true friendship in the real world, and that you as a parent are helping them build that, and not kind of giving in to the pressures towards the smartphone. And I do think churches and schools, and neighborhoods are these natural kind of sources of community for parents to build, as I call in the book, these counter communities that start to kind of push the screens out of childhood. And it's amazing. It really is positive. Once a group of parents kind of gets together, the direction of the pressure on screens really reverses. Like, this neighborhood that was described to me, like, the families had just kind of talked to each other, like, we're not doing phones on this street. Our kids aren't having phones. They're playing outside together. And they said it changed the kind of whole culture of the street, where if a new family moved to the block, it was like, hey, just so you know, we're not doing phones, and, like, don't be the parent to bring phones into this neighborhood. And so the pressures reverse the other way. So I think it's really, really critical. We need strength in numbers. We need to find other families to do this with us, and that you don't have to find 20 families. Like, if you just find 3 or 4 families to do this with you, that's enough of a core group, to really be successful in kind of this opt-out lifestyle.
Yeah, I'll just say what we've seen. My wife gave a copy of your book to our head of school and then to the principal, and had brought up how at recess, if they had indoor recess, a lot of times the kids would just get on the tablets the whole time, right, for that half hour or so. And after she gave the book to them a couple weeks ago, she was there, and they had indoor recess, and the principal came on the loudspeaker and said, "Hey, we're not using technology. This is not tech free indoor recess." And so, like, even just
That's
little things
amazing.
like that,
Yeah.
and I think what we've just seen in this is that for a lot of these schools, or even for other parents, they know this is messed up too, right? And they're
Yeah.
looking for somebody to lead out on it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's what I appreciate about your book, is it's really accessible and really straightforward on some of these really practical questions.
I'm so encouraged to hear that example, but I think that's precisely it. Like, parents kind of just want to be told what to do. Like, even like schools want to be told what to do. I think, again, like, the kind of cultural just norm has been the screens, but I think, again, everyone knows in their guts these aren't good, but no one's really told them, like, you can do this and this is how to do it. And I think, just like anything, a very positive vision and just seeing other families, other schools, how they've done this is just extremely encouraging to make you think, oh, I could do this too. And that was really the message I wanted to hold out in the book. And so I'm really glad to just hear that one anecdote that your school, because I'm like, I imagine what the kids did instead of the tablets was, like, talk to each other, play with each other. They were
Right.
creative,
Yeah.
they came up with things. So I'm so encouraged to hear that.
Yeah, and it's almost like we need the permission because
You need the
we're fed.
permission. That's
Yeah,
right.
we're fed all this stuff, or we believe these things because technology has become so ingrained in our lives. Like, I don't want to be a Luddite. I don't. What if my kid's not safe when they're away from home? Like, just all those things, forgetting that my childhood was spent riding my bike all around the neighborhood, and my parents didn't know where I was, and I just kind of walked back in when I got hungry, that kind of stuff. Like, we have survived as a civilization without cell phones for a long time, and it's
That's
okay to
right.
put them away.
That's exactly right.
So, all right, Claire, as we wrap, and I didn't prep these guys for this, so I'll give you guys a time if you want to come up with any. But I just want to do rapid fire with you of, like, the biggest objections
Mm,
to tech
yeah.
exit. right?
Oh, yeah.
And so if you guys think of any that you want to just fire, let's do our best to gang up on Claire and see if we can get her to crack here. But I think she's up for it. So first, like, major pushback that we get on this one is, I've got how my school can't opt out of cell phones because I got to be able to contact my kid in the middle school day. What happens if I need to reach my kid, or if there's like violence or fire at the school and the kids need to contact me, they can't give up their cell phones.
Yeah, no, this is a myth. I mean, you can obviously call the school office. Every classroom has a phone. They can get a message to your child. I mean, like you were saying with riding your bike around the neighborhood, like we've done school without phones on each individual student for decades, and it's been fine. Like a parent can always communicate with the school if they need to. And in those emergency situations you mentioned, like a worst case scenario, the safest thing to do is for your child to not be distracted on your phone, but listening to first responders, listening to the directions of their teacher. And, the teacher has a phone. And if they need to get a hold of a parent, they need to get a hold of someone, they can do that. But having all the kids on their own phones actually can make the situation less safe. We need our kids to not be distracted following directions. And of course, then they can get in touch via a teacher, via the school after the incident is over. So those are myths. I think parents give into a lot of fear, but then when you look at the data, it's actually better for kids to not have access to the phones during the day.
All right, man's got one.
Okay. So my boss at the job is forcing us all to participate in fantasy football. What do we do? No. So, we've been talking a lot about, this is what we used to do in the past, right? In the Stone Ages, and when, Mike was running around on his bike coming home when he got hungry. But moving forward, right, this is a completely, tech saturated, it's all centered around technology. And so, are we ill preparing our kids if they aren't able, right? Or will they be like our grandparents, right? Their grandparents who have no idea what to do with phones and can barely function in life. Will our kids be like that 10, 15 years from now if they do what you're asking them to do?
Yes, I get asked this a lot. So, no, because here's the thing, kids, what they most need to develop is critical thinking, problem solving skills, creativity, which is all undermined by handing a child a phone too young before they're ready for it. There are other ways for them to practice and develop actual hard tech skills, like how to use a computer or Microsoft Excel. As I mentioned, a lot of these families have a family home computer where they can practice those actual tech skills in the eyesight of a parent, but they're not getting sucked down into an addictive, distracting device. And I tell parents, smartphones don't teach kids tech skills. They teach kids how to swipe between apps and surf the internet and scroll through social media. So they're not actually being prepared for the digital age. And so the better way is to allow them to actually learn tech skills through computer class or computer lab. But in terms of giving the phone, like that is not going to teach our kids the skills that they need, and actually it will undermine the precise skills they need. And the last anecdote is these tech CEOs, Steve Jobs, who developed the iPhone, they don't let their kids use their technologies. And they sent them all to these Waldorf schools that were completely no tech. So, and I don't think they felt like they were setting their kids back. I think they felt like they were putting their kids ahead, knowing that these devices were actually extremely addictive and we're not going to allow their kids to develop the critical thinking skills, again, and problem solving, creativity that they need. And those are the skills that will allow kids to use technology as a tool to be the masters of the technology, not to be mastered by it. And that's what we want to prepare our kids to do.
I think we've covered this one a little bit already, but I'm gonna say it anyway. My kid will be the weird one or the social outcast because they won't be part of the sports team group chat, or if we make them Mahan, knock it off, sir.
I wouldn't blame that on the tech.
Anyway, to my point, or like if a parent is saying we're not going to have this in our home, and when you come over, you got to put your phone in the basket. Parents, we're going to let you know if you send your kids with a phone, it's not going to be used in our home. Like just dealing with that kind of social exclusion because you're not participating in tech.
Yeah. And I think, there are real concerns. Like you want your kids to have friends, but I will just respond by saying, I think we need as parents to just take more initiative to find other families who are agreed and like minded with us. This doesn't mean every single one of our kids' friends is going to share our tech restrictions, but they do have some friends who also don't have phones. And then I think we need to actually teach our kids what real friendship looks like. And a dad made this point to me that if someone's not going to be your friend because you're not in the group chat, or you aren't on Snapchat and so you're dead to me, I'm not going to talk to you or communicate with you, well, that's not a real friend. And so he said their tech decisions actually helped their kids find their real friends faster. He said it was very friend filtering. It kind of weeded out these friends who really weren't going to be that good of a friend to begin with, because they didn't want to hang with your kid because they didn't have a phone. And so he said what his kids really did find was they found their real true friends faster. And that can be a little bit of a painful process and can take some time. But he said the end result was they had really good, genuine friendships. And some of those kids had phones and some of them didn't. But the point was that real friends accommodate your difference. They don't exclude you for it, but they accommodate that difference. And so I do think, yeah, there's something we need to even do in preparing our kids of like, this is what a real friend looks like. And I understand not everyone is going to accept, our tech restrictions or think they're cool, but we know that this is what's best for you. And we want to actually help you find really good friends. And then doing what you can as a parent to create those environments for your kids to develop those real life friendships, finding other families and being the kind of family to have kids over to your house and kind of creating those contexts for them to build really good friendships. So it takes work as a parent, and it takes a little bit of, steel in your spine and courage, and helping impart that courage to your kids as well.
Yeah, I'll just say, Claire, I think it's a real cost benefit analysis that we're talking about there, and I think just for most families and for most people, we end up rationalizing with some of these excuses and downplaying the real cost, the real harm
That's right.
of this tech. And yeah, I mean, that again, one of the things I appreciate about your book is it is honest about like this is going to be hard, but it's important. All
That's
right,
right.
couple more one here for you. I had video games as a kid. I had Sega, I had Nintendo, I had PlayStation, and I turned out great. But yeah, no, but how would you respond to that?
Yeah, and I would just say the technology has just evolved really rapidly, and so the old school video games are not like the online video gaming apps of today that are just highly immersive, much more addictive, constantly leveling up, more kind of tokens, features. All these gaming apps, also for what it's worth, if parents don't know, have incorporated the elements of social media. I mean, they all have these messaging features, friending features, and so predators are even reaching out to kids through gaming apps because it has these kind of social components built in. And again, the video games and the kind of online world today is incredibly immersive and individualized. So it's not like kids are getting together at someone's house to play video games. Kids are going home after school, getting on their computer and putting their headsets on and being immersed in their own screen for like 2 to 3 hours. So it's very different in kind. And I would say again, like I talk about this in my book, like screen entertainment can be enjoyed in the home in sparing and shared ways. So you can watch a family movie night together on a Friday night and enjoy that form of entertainment as a shared experience as a family. That's very different than each family member being on an individualized screen. And I would acknowledge it could be true for video games. If a dad wants to pull out an old school video game with a video game console and play with his sons as a communal activity, like on a Saturday, I'm not going to die on that hill. But what I'm trying to warn parents about is the video game nature of today is just very different. And we have to really resist this push towards these immersive, addictive, individualized online environments.
Yeah, I've got my original NES hooked up to my flat screen TV. It's awesome.
Your NES. How do you? I don't even know how you do that. Like,
it's my original NES
That's
from 1988.
impressive.
Still works. We're playing Mario Brothers this weekend.
That's more work than you've ever done around here. All right, well, last one.
No lies.
Right, that's and this one I'm sure is going to be a little sensitive for some folks, but I think we're seeing a lot more, or at least experientially, I've seen a lot more diagnosis of like ADHD, and you'll have people say, "My kid is so difficult. What am I supposed to do with them?" The screen is the one thing that can give me peace of mind or things like that. How would you respond to that?
Yeah, I would just say, obviously I'm not a medical practitioner to diagnose your child or not, but I would just say I would be really strongly suspicious that screens are having an impact, and they may not be the complete explanatory variable behind the symptoms, but they could be a big piece of it. And so, what I would encourage families in my book to do, and I walk through the steps of this, is to just do a detox. Maybe you're not sure you can commit to the tech exit lifestyle for the long term, but don't you want to know if your child could be a better version of themselves if they just got rid of the screens? And so many families actually started down this tech exit lifestyle by just testing out a digital detox because they felt like they had really reached rock bottom with their kids and with their kids' behavior. And they would even say, honestly, it felt impossible to us how to parent this child without a screen, but we just recognized something had to change. We just had to try it out. And they're honest. Like the first couple days and weeks were hard. I mean, breaking a habit and an addiction is difficult, but then they kind of pushed through that pain point and we're just amazed at the differences in their kids. Like the good news is a child's brain can reset, like it can return to a normal level where it's not so dysregulated and overstimulated by the kind of constant hits of the screen and the way that their bodies honestly get sent into this fight or flight mode, like this state of hyper arousal by the constant stimulation of the screens, that the body biologically can come down from that and return to a baseline level of homeostasis. And they said then they saw these changes in their kids they just never could have imagined. And so they kept going. And it got easier. Kids are naturally creative. They started coming up with their own games and entertaining themselves. So yes, a detox will at first take parental effort and time to help your kids find those alternative activities and to kind of push through the initial resistance. But I think that it is worth any family at any time just trying out a 30-day digital detox if you can, to just see the results for yourself. And if this makes a difference in your child's behavior, and if their, emotional dysregulation, their tantrums, just try removing the screens. And again, you kind of really have to commit to a time period because it does take time for the body to kind of return to a normal level. But just, I think it's so worth doing. So really consider that. I walk through that in my book. There's lots of resources for how to do a digital detox. And I think anyone can commit to trying something for 30 days, even if you're not sold on it for the long term.
Well, this has been a great conversation, Claire. We're so thankful for this book. Tell our listeners where they can find it and where they can follow your work, because as you said, technology is always changing, and hopefully you're still producing resources that'll help us navigate the brave new world that is technological evolutions.
Yes, no, absolutely. Thank you for asking. So thetechexit.com, very simple, is the book website. I have additional resources there for parents, like a discussion guide you can download to go through this in a group of other parents. I'm talking about finding other families, read through this book as a group, and other resources like practical tip sheets of activities for kids if you're doing a detox and trying to come up with screen-free activities. So those kinds of resources, as well as where you can buy the book, all at thetechexit.com. EPPC.org, that's my professional home, has all my writings, all the model bills and policies and things I've worked on. So all my kind of professional work is also collected there. And then finally, I do have a Substack, claremorell.substack.com, where I intend to keep putting out resources and things I publish. If people want to subscribe to that, they'll get that in their email inbox. And so they can keep up with the latest trends or things that they should be aware of as parents. And if they're interested as well in kind of policy solutions. So those are the kind of 3 places I would send people.
Access it on a computer, not on an interactive screen. Do I have that right?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Well, Clare Morell, thanks so much for joining us today here on The Narrative.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Narrative, presented by CCV and produced by Wessler Media. If you found today's episode insightful, leave us a review or rating and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. We're your hosts, Mike Andrews, Aaron Bear, and David Mahan, and we'll see you next time on The Narrative.